Thank you. Good morning, and welcome to this meeting of the Scrutiny and Performance Committee of 26th of April 2023. I'm the convener, Councillor Colin Stewart. I'm joined by the Vice Convener, Bailey Alistair Bailey, by Ms Molly, the Committee Clerk, and by Ms Simpson, the Head of Legal and Governance Services. Can I remind the committee to keep their microphones on mute throughout the meeting unless they're speaking, and for councillors and officers in the chambers and online to use the chat box to attract my attention, as I can't see everyone attending in the meeting on screen at the one time. And can I remind, I'll lead by example by checking that my mobile devices are on silent. Great. Okay, can I ask if there are any apologies for the meeting today?
Yes, Convener, we have an apology from Councillor Shires with Councillor Braun substituting. Members online, when I call out your name, could you please confirm you're present? Councillor Frampton.
Present.
Thank you. And Councillor Robertson.
Present.
Thank you. All other members are present in the Chambers, Convener.
Thank you, Clerk. Item 2 on the agenda, can I ask if there are any declarations of interest in respect of business on the agenda today? Councillor Braun.
There you go, Bob. Thank you very much. Convener, yes, just a bit of advice. We've got a presentation by Live Active Leisure. I'm not sure if I don't. Mr Simpson's advised me, so no, I don't need to declare one. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. If there are no other declarations of interest. Item 3 on the agenda, the minute of the Scrutiny and Performance Committee meeting of the 1st of February 2023. Can I ask if that minute can be agreed? Thank you. That's agreed. And item 4 on the agenda is the outstanding business statement. Can I ask if there are any questions on the outstanding business statement, and can I ask if the clerk can just update us on item 6?
Yes, Convener, just to say that the Improvement Service is arranging a training session with the necessary officers tomorrow, and then we will, following that, we will arrange another briefing session with elected members.
Thank you, and a note as well in terms of item 9 that a briefing session on the support available to young people regarding mental well-being has been arranged for the 9th of May. Can I ask if does anybody have any questions on the outstanding business statement? No. Can we then ask if the outstanding business statement can be noted and for completed actions to be removed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Item 5 on the agenda is an update by our arm's length external organisations. We have Culture, Perth and Kinross, Live Active Leisure and Horsecross Arts. So from Culture, Perth and Kinross, I would like to welcome Helen Smout, the Chief Executive, and Mr. Ellis. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Mr. Finlay from the board, and Ms. Smout, are you going to give you a presentation first? Great, I'll hand over to you then.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Thank you. So thank you very much for the invitation to give the update today. As I've said, we have James Findlay here today. I will rattle through this as I'm aware you've got a very extensive agenda, and happy to take any questions after the meeting if anybody wants to follow up on anything that I cover off. If I could have the next slide, please. We've been asked today to highlight our work in a number of different areas, so I thought it was easier by doing this by illustrating our work and touching on a number of examples of projects we've undertaken since our last presentation to you. Working with our communities is a major part of our core purpose, and we believe strongly there's no such thing as a group or community who are hard to reach. Rather, it's us who may be hard to reach. We work to find ways of making relevant and engaging connections to address this and seek to work collaboratively in ways which are unique to us as an organisation, such as using the museum collections to spark conversations and engagement and build content for the new Perth Museum displays. This includes the Blended Memories project, which engage with former employees of Dewars in Perth as well as their extended families. Using the history and heritage of the whisky industry in the region, the team collected oral histories, photographs and other objects, which will be used to create displays in the new museum. This way of collaborating with communities and putting their experiences at the heart of the stories we tell through our collections is often referred to as co-production or co-creation or even co-curation. But whatever term you use, it's about making very deep community connections, amplifying their heritage, cultures and stories. Our most recent project, People of Pillars, brought together people who'd recently arrived in the region with local residents to explore an important local heritage story, to understand more of the identity and culture of the region they now call home. Working with the Perth Syrian Families Support Group, the Scottish Refugee Council and the Letham Community Club, 75 individuals engaged with the project, resulting in 12 new oral histories and other community submissions to the museum collections. A multinational group of 12 women from diverse faiths and cultures who've recently moved to Perth from areas of political or military conflict worked with artist Aileen Shelley to support some of the dyeing techniques which would have been very familiar to Poolers employees locally, and using this in embroidery work, the women produced the most beautiful quilt with emblems and affirmations which reflected their individual identities and were inspired by the heritage of the region. The quilt formed part of a display designed by those engaged in the project at Perth Museum and Art Gallery, and all the stories, photographs and objects collected as part of the project along with the quilt are now part of the collections. Our heritage is not the only powerful tool for connecting people, and we also use our venues as spaces to bring together community groups and encourage their engagement with the resources we have available. At the AK Bell, the Health and Wellbeing Hub is an area within the main library which offers a welcoming space for individual study or small group meetings and is surrounded by extensive health and wellbeing resources. Many groups new to the library are now making regular use of the space to meet formally and informally, and we've hosted creative writing for wellbeing sessions, mindfulness and health information sessions within the space, encouraging new people into the library. Our health resources are increasingly seeing use. We have books on prescription, which was a social prescribing model we'd had with the NHS. 348 issues were made to 128 individuals in the last year. Interesting to note that the top 10 books being borrowed, 9 of these relate to mental health issues and 1 to chronic fatigue, and 5 of the top 10 books relate to mental health issues in children and young people. So these books and borrowings do reflect needs of communities, and we can then tailor our services based on that information and make sure that we're responding to some of those needs. If I could move on to the next slide, please. In the last year, we had over 441,000 visits to our venues. That's a 79% increase on the previous year. However, visits to our services still remain down by about a third, and that's mostly within our libraries. Our museums are pretty much back to pre-pandemic levels. This is pretty much the picture across Scotland, although there are variations from region to region. However, it's unlikely we will see a return to pre-pandemic use. How people live and work have changed by the pandemic. And rather than chase what went before, we are seeking to build engagement which reflects the behaviour and needs of our audiences now. So for us, whilst footfall remains important, what is most critical is the level of engagement and making sure that the people who could most benefit from our services and activities are the ones who are engaged with us. We do this in a number of different ways, including looking at our programming, making sure the events, workshops, talks and activities are reflected in the needs and interests of communities, and that there are opportunities to engage with these across Perth and Kinross, not just in the city. We examine audience and general demographic data and the feedback and evaluation from our service users and non-users. We look at what is working elsewhere in Scotland, the UK and beyond. We're also mindful that it's not just enough to have the services available. We do have to let people know about them in ways which grab their interest. Targeted marketing campaigns such as the one we did for the digital library service between October last year and March this year placed our online services as a way people could save money. And you'll see some examples of that on the slide. The campaign was delivered with advertising on buses and key routes around local libraries across Perth and Kinross, as well as through a social media campaign and press releases. And it works. During the 6-month campaign, we saw a 45% increase in the number of people joining the library online compared to the same period the previous year. And it was a 104% increase on the preceding 6 months. We also saw a 10% increase in the number of e-book and e-audiobook issues and a 33% increase in e-magazine and press reader use while the campaign was running. We'll be continuing to focus on more targeted advertising campaigns such as this for both the libraries, the new Perth Art Gallery and the new museum over the coming year. And the focus of our engagement work will also continue to be targeted to meet the needs of communities. If I could have the next slide, please. As mentioned, the needs of our communities have and are changing. An increase in mental health issues is evident in our venues and through our project work. We work with diverse communities, some who are highly vulnerable or in challenging situations. We aim to work in a way that is agile, collaborative, and that pulls in additional funding and resources to enhance our response where we can. Our Reading for Recovery project, in partnership with HMP Perth, was developed as a result of the work already being delivered with the prison library and in response to the increasing demand for recovery services within the prison population. The project is only one of only 32 from 14 different European countries to participate in community prototyping work through the European Challenge Fund. We were granted €10,000 to support a Reading for Recovery programme centred on those addressing addiction or mental health and wellbeing. Through the project, we offer reading group bibliotherapy, reading challenges to develop critical thinking skills and to support better decision making, and support vocational training with work party reading resources towards accreditation. We were also a key partner in the Warm Welcome initiative, working to ensure our libraries were welcoming, safe spaces for those seeking warmth during the winter months. With funding from the Council, we were able to distribute 574 warm packs to individuals and families. More than 200 people received free tea and coffee to help warm them. We also partnered with Social Flock to offer free adult and children's outdoor clothing to anyone in need, and with Councillor Barrett's Knitted Blanket Initiative, where we distributed more than 40 of these beautiful blankets. Recognising the role of libraries as a safe space, we're working with the police in Perth to make the AK Bell Library a key location for the reporting and referral of hate crime in the city, and the library is becoming a third-party reporting centre. Staff have received initial training, and this may be rolled out to further sites if successful. We continue to respond to local needs and interests through our programming, with talks and workshops run in our venues across Perth and Kinross, many delivered in response to user feedback, reading interests, or as part of a collaborative work with local groups. We worked with 62 different community-based groups in the last year, including Mindspace, Andy Mann's Club, Perth Autism Support, Cree 50+ Group, Kinross Camera Group, and so on. If I could have the next slide, please. Digital engagement continues to be a feature of much of our work, reflecting the acceleration of online service use driven by the pandemic. We continue to be at the forefront of the adoption of new technologies, with the first library services in Scotland to offer hublets in our libraries, the first Scottish service to offer Princh, Wi-Fi printing services. Princh means anyone, even those who are not library members, can send documents to print at a local library in Perth and Kinross from anywhere in the world. This is great for people who need to print occasional documents for ID or travel, but who do not print enough to have a costly printer at home. Our digital footprint enables us to reach audiences beyond Perth and Kinross. Whilst the appetite for online performance in talk has reduced following its peak during the pandemic, there remains a strong interest in accessing online content, and this enables us to reach audiences for whom a physical visit to our services is impossible, either due to personal circumstances or location. Our Suitor Festival, which is on this weekend, if you haven't already got all your tickets, has a number of blended events. Those can be attended in person and are also being live streamed. And over 4,500 individuals participated in our online events last year. We'll continue to support individuals to access online services with regular digital skills sessions led by our digital champion volunteers, and we ran 279 digital skills training events in the last year. Innovative digital experiences are also a feature of our museum services, and the new museum, when it opens, we will continue to collaborate, develop new ways of accessing our collections and their stories, including continuing our partnership with Google Arts and Culture to digitise more of the collection for online use, and developing new collections engagement tools such as My Museum, which is a digital table through which visitors can explore curated collection and heritage stories and enables access to collections that we cannot have on display. If I can have the last slide. Just very briefly, we only do the work we do because of the sound governance within the organisation and the tight financial control. This is supported by external audits and regulation, reporting, and the stringent monitoring of our activity by yourselves. We share insights into our work behind the scenes via our social media, and our website has information on the board alongside all our accounts, health and safety and performance reports. We are working on a new website at the moment and are aiming to launch this in early summer. It'll be an opportunity for us to start to publish all our FOI responses to make even more of our key information available freely to all. That's been a real gallop through everything, and as I've said, I'm happy to take any questions now or after the meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Smout. I think what we'll do is we'll take all of the presentations and then invite questions from members, because there may be questions which apply to more than one ALIO, if that's okay with the committee. Shrugs of assent. Okay, thank you. So we'll move now to our next presentation, which is from Live Active Leisure. We have Paul Cromwell, the Chief Executive, and David McElhose, the Chair of the board.
Oh, there we go. Apologies, that's better. Okay, I understand the time pressures, so again, I'll try and rattle through the presentation. I've got a number of slides. I won't go through every bullet point, but we'll cover them as part of my presentation. Company's vision is to be the provider of choice for the people of Perth and Kinross to live physically active lives. The last 3 years have seen an incredible disruption across society with the pandemic, the cost of living crisis, and resultant high levels of inflation. Understanding what the new normal is continues to be uncertain for all businesses. What is certain is the need for the services that Live Active Leisure provide, whether this is for our universal offer or activities and interventions which are targeted for those in our communities who need additional support and engagement. First slide, please. Company delivers its services across 4 key areas: community wellbeing, community sport, active schools, and the sport and leisure venues. Specific focus, the method of engagement and how we promote the activities across these areas is different, but there are of course connections between each one, which in turn supports wider engagement and ultimately supports the post-COVID recovery process for our communities to be more active. Community sport and wellbeing teams have been restructured so that each of our 5 localities, Perth City, Kinross Shire, Eastern Perthshire, Strathern and Highland Perthshire, has a designated representative and a member of the team championing, developing and delivering physical activity and sport. This has ensured an equitable offer across all localities. The team continue to make an impact through all areas of Perth and Kinross, supporting local sporting organisations, developing local coaches, delivering activity sessions and enhancing the opportunities that exist for local people to be physically active through sport. The team deliver and support many projects, including community sports hubs. There's currently 12 established, some of which are within our smaller rural communities, including Blair Athol, Dunkeld and Burnham, St Meadows community, and there are also plans to support our new hub in the Bankfoot area. Other new key projects include college community coaches working in partnership with Perth College UHI and students on the HNC Sports Coaching course to develop skills and confidence of local coaches, creating new opportunities for physical activity within identified local primary schools, and to provide a more meaningful volunteering opportunity for the students, which is a requirement for the course. This project was delivered in partnership with the Active Schools team and engaged with 5 schools in SIMD levels 1 to 3, with the students delivering in after-school clubs, and it is hoped that this project will evolve in further schools and sports clubs in the community. The Sport for Change network, in partnership with Sports Scotland and Ganachie Trust Fund, aims to address inequalities that prevent local people accessing quality sport and physical activity opportunity. A network of clubs will use sport to focus on the theme of mental well-being, and clubs are being supported with training and funding in order to carry out projects within their clubs. All member clubs have committed to signing up to the Scottish Association for Mental Health Charter for Physical Activity in Sports to improve equality and reduce discrimination. The lifeblood of our community sport activity is, of course, our volunteers, and I'm pleased to confirm that the number of volunteers within the clubs we work closely with has increased by approximately 20% on the previous year to 1,027. The Active Schools team continues to develop opportunities for all young people to take part in sport and physical activity and provide a targeted approach to removing barriers to participation. Participation rates are still in the process of recovery, but there is a positive trend across the first 2 terms on the previous year, and this includes across levels of areas of increased challenge. Activity increased by 8% in term 1 and 5% in term 2 in comparison to the previous year. The year has also seen an increase of volunteers from 168 to 364 at the end of term 2 compared to previous year. Projects include Gate Loudy event that was a great success last year, swimming projects delivered in partnership with Letham for All and Jeanfield Swifts FC, and a Swim Success project, all aimed at supporting targeted children who are non-swimmers to attend free swimming lessons and support them to meet the Safe Swimmer standard. The Community Wellbeing team continue to provide support across a range of programmes across our communities for those with the greatest health challenges. The Care at Home project supports some of the hardest to reach individuals within our communities. Our teams make visits to clients' homes and work with them over an 8 to 10-week period to improve mobility, strength and confidence. This year we have made 1,300 visits to clients' homes. Where appropriate, clients are then signposted to buddy walks, which is our next step on our locality physical activity pathway. This 10-week intervention supports the client to build up their capacity for longer walks. By completing this intervention, clients have the confidence to take short walks themselves, improving confidence and well-being. Clients can then be signposted to the next step on the pathway and join one of our Stride for Life walks in their local area. The pathway continues right up to attending gym swimming classes within their local venues. Activity referral demands have increased. This is a referral from a health practitioner and provides 12-week-long support, followed by the opportunity to take out the company's Connect membership, which provides discounted access to further support regular attendance. We also engage with the PKC social prescribing team to ensure that there is clear awareness of the activities and services that the company provide. Overall wellbeing attendances are at 67,000 compared to previous year of 37,500, a further positive trend to support recovery. Collaborating with key partners and stakeholders is key to the success of these programs, and we continue to develop relationships. Given the financial challenges which exist for all organisations, it is pleasing to report that we have grown the funding support for the year ahead by £72,000, generating over £500,000 of additional funding resources to ensure that we can continue to deliver these vital initiatives. In addition, we have recently, with Perth and Kinross Council, signed a renewed 4-year partnership agreement with Sports Scotland to secure funding around the Active Schools and Community Sports Hub programmes. Our venues provide universal offer across a range of activities, including gym, group fitness, swim, curling, bowling and sports hall activity. Performance overall is at approximately 87% of pre-COVID levels, but this does vary at a locality and activity level. The national data that was available to us at the start of 2022 indicated post-recovery levels expectations of approximately 72%. More recent reports indicate recovery levels nationally between 80 and 90%. Therefore, the current level that is being achieved is positive, but continued recovery towards pre-COVID levels is still targeted. We will look to further develop activities and programmes for children, including a refreshed holiday programme, active birthday parties options and term time developments. We will build on the success of the reviewed swimming and gymnastics programmes, and we will continue to develop our fitness membership offer, providing value across a range of activities. We will also ensure that we maximise opportunities available to us, ensuring that venues such as Perth Leisure Pool are fully resourced and able to provide a great customer experience during high demand periods. The recent Easter holidays provided the opportunity for 20,000 swimmers to use the venue, which saw an increase of 25% on the year before. Venue development plans will be refreshed, recognising the differences in recovery across the different localities, and messaging and marketing plans will be developed to reflect this. Next slide, please. We have recognised the need to continue to invest in technology and digital services which impact positively on the customer journey. Online services have been further developed and improved. Customers are now able to book and pay for a range of activities online across all venues, including gym and group fitness activities, sports hall sessions, gym inductions, memberships, holiday programmes, children's swimming lessons, including progress updates, and the company will continue to develop our online capabilities to meet customer expectations. Technology investments have also been introduced in venues, providing improved access arrangements which help alleviate queue management challenges. Due to the design of some of our reception areas, it can be challenging to retrofit within the existing structures, but we will complete further reviews this year across the estate to see what further improvements are possible. We will engage with customers on a range of digital platforms to enable ongoing engagement and feedback with customers on all aspects of service delivery. This is an essential strand of customer engagement, and as an example, the company currently has 32,000 followers across all social media platforms. Digital platforms will continue to be reviewed as necessary to ensure that the company adapts to trends and patterns of use. The company's website provides the opportunity to promote and showcase the services we provide. The website currently generates 60,000 visits per month, and a major refresh will be completed over the next 3 months. The use of digital services will also continue to be used as a business tool for internal meetings and to streamline and improve internal business processes and improve efficiencies. Touching on team resilience and flexibility, recent years have seen changes and challenges in recruitment, and at the same time we are increasingly lean in key areas of service delivery. Whilst this scenario provides opportunities for financial efficiencies, it increases the risks of skill gaps, which can then reduce capacity for delivery. This is a key area where further resilience and flexibility needs to be built in to our workforce planning. There are also further opportunities to consider more collaborative arrangements with similar organisations to ensure that staff resources and skills are maximised. In challenging times, there is a tendency to focus inward. We recognise that this is the time to also look outwards and develop new relationships and challenge ways of working. This will be a key action as we move forward. In terms of customer engagement, I've previously mentioned that the methods of customer engagement vary across our key business areas, but consistently we are proactive and flexible in our approach. Engagement takes the form of surveys, face-to-face meetings, meetings with groups and clubs, engaging with health professionals, school teams, pupils' voice, young person's sports panel, meet the manager and team, just to mention a few. We hope this approach inspires people to share their views. This two-way conversation is essential to ensure that we listen, respond and develop the business to reflect customer feedback. The senior team and directors are currently meeting with venue user groups in person, and this engagement will be developed as a regular programme across our venues and services. Messaging, marketing and communication will be developed across all of the business areas and will reflect the different opportunities provided across the company's services. Messaging will reflect the company's values, its contribution and community role as a charity, delivering health, well-being, sport and physical opportunities. Next slide, please. Accountability. So as a company, we completely understand that we are accountable. We are accountable to Perth and Kinross Council and are subject to the PKC Scrutiny and Accountability Framework and the comprehensive arrangements which are in place to ensure the council are following the public bound. We are accountable to our other funders. We provide reports and information as required to ensure that we deliver, meet the key objectives, and we maintain positive relations with other funding partners to sustain and grow the offer we provide. We are also accountable to our customers, and we have an internal governance framework, including board meetings and committee structures, to ensure that all areas of company business are considered. Our online content continues to be developed and improved and includes a range of information, including news and information updates, board meeting minutes, company's articles of association, which provides the company's charitable objectives, company policies and procedures, company accounts, and our annual achievement report, which showcases all the positive work that has been achieved by the team over the last year. Further online content includes the company directors' details and information. Our directors are visible, they are accessible, and they are recruited from our communities based on their skill set, but also on their passion for sport and physical activity. And they are all very committed. As volunteers, they give a considerable amount of time, knowledge, and experience to support and continue to support the company and the activities we deliver across our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cromwell. And finally, apologies, I said Horsecross, I think, earlier. Representing Perth Theatre and Concert Hall, we have Nick Williams, the Chief Executive, and Colin Hood, the Chair of the Board. Mr. Williams, if you'd like to do your presentation now.
There we go. Colin is going to kick off anyway, so hopefully I'll use that into my time. Yeah, good morning, Chair. I thought I'd do a couple of slides to introduce Nick. It's the first time I've been here. I thought I'd do a bit of an introduction, if that's all right, and just cover some of the salient points from last year and looking ahead to this year. So we can have the first slide, please. Right. Just a couple of years ago, as we were coming out of COVID, that the main talk was about building back better. The world then seemed to go into a cost of living crisis, and that was left behind. But last year was our best year ever. Our highest ever ticket revenue, grossing more than £1 million. That's up 40% on what our target was. The economic benefit of that to the city is we calculate some £16 million. Our best gross profit from catering and bars at almost £500,000. A reserves position, which just a few years ago was a negative 400k, so we were living on advanced ticket sales, has now improved vastly to be a positive almost £400,000. Our forecast deficit for this current year is 77k, whereas last year it was double that. So we're moving in the right direction towards sustainability. Many of our productions have been nominated for awards and are generally very well received, not just by our own public, but professionals within the arts. Our conference hall now is fully restored and ready for rentals, and we hosted the MOD this year. And hopefully those people who have visited us have noticed a large cultural change in our staff, which has been driven by the Chief Executive and the executive team. Next slide, please. Yeah, the budgeting process was not easy for MD. We live in very difficult times. The funding this year from PKC is perhaps not as good as we would like, but it's very much better than we expected. It gives us a working amount to continue to improve and to build upon last year, which was our best year ever. We believe we can build momentum over the next few years and create a much better product for our community. Thank you also for the £80,000 towards creation of the Perthshire box office. That's very welcome. And thank you also for the commitment to replace the building management centre systems, which will give us a better operating environment and reduce our energy costs. I'd also like to thank you for the 3-year financial commitment. We know that's an outlook and things can change, but it does give the board then a visibility as to what our funding deficit would be and what our top line growth has to be to become sustainable. We now have a 3-year plan, an embryo 3-year plan, which will see us within that timescale have a positive budget outcome, and we have reserves in hand that allows us to mop up the deficit between now and then. So, it's good news. But I'll pass over to Nick, who's now got some of the answers to your pertinent questions today. Thank you, Colin. If we move on to the next slide, to give some of the detail around the questions you were asking for. Apologies, this typeface and this is a little small. Obviously, we are 2 city centre based venues, and attendance in those venues over the last year is about 18% more than it was in 2019-20. But that doesn't mean that we sit in the city centre and ignore
the wider region around us. The sort of driving force behind a lot of our work in rural communities is our learning and engagement programme. And we work very closely with schools, with community groups and care homes, especially across the region. We've worked with schools in Kinross, in Milnathort, in Blairgowrie, in Crieff, in Grantley and elsewhere, as well as taking work into nurseries, working with care homes, as I mentioned, and running adult community choirs in the Cars and in Kinross. You may well have seen our Gig in a Truck project, which goes far and wide across the region as well. The Perthshire Box Office, as Colin just mentioned, is in its early pilot phase and will move into a second pilot phase over the summer. It is designed as an in-person phone and professional ticket service for any event, not just arts events across the region. And we are now receiving requests from others to come and use the service, most recently from a wildlife-based charity in Dunkeld. So we look forward to updating the committee on that a bit further on. Whilst we do go out and about into our rural communities, it's very difficult for us to take the majority of what we do into those contexts. So we, along with Creative Carpenters Scotland, have sourced some funding to look at travel in the region and how we might better connect some of those communities with what we do. So Transforming Audience Travel Through Art is a project that will run over the summer and into the autumn to develop attitudes, understanding and approaches to sustainable transport options to connect communities outside of central Perth with what we do in Perth. And finally, we are doing a site-specific show in the autumn in 2 locations, one in Dunkeld and one in Lochleven. I'm not going to announce it formally yet, but we are sort of taking work out and about as well. If we move on to the next slide. Our community engagement programme, as I think we've reported several times before, continues to go to strength, seeking to develop links with our communities far and wide and to work with organisations to partner and understand the community needs and where an arts intervention can help. We have started to see a really clear link between the groups that we work with around and about and the audience demographic shift, which is really heartening to see that that's actually working and bringing new audiences into our events. Just to give a few examples, our Mindspace project is ongoing and is about to grow thanks to additional external funding, and this is a creative writing project that Mindspace refer their users onto, and we've been overwhelmed with both the demand for it and the output from it. We've started a new project called Elevate with Scottish Ballet, which is for those with sufferers of multiple sclerosis, and that joins our work with Dance for Parkinson's and Vocal Cord, which is for those with breathing difficulties. We've started to work on funding for subsidised and discounted tickets and transport for participants in all of our events, recognising that barriers to even come to sharings or to engage with us could be fairly straightforward, but actually as straightforward but fundamental as transport. That's an ongoing issue, and we continue to explore where we can funding opportunities to support community groups coming in and seeing what the venues are like and breaking down perceptual barriers. Many of you will have seen our show last year, Oh When the Saints, which was nominated for the Stage Community Project of the Year. That was a 2-year programme of working with people who would probably not categorise themselves as arts attenders. It also brought in 33% first-time bookers into the theatre, which was a very much one of the key drivers behind doing it. And finally, our youth theatre goes from strength to strength. Brainstorm, their second main stage show, in February of this year, had its largest cast to date, and we expect that programme to continue into next year and develop a technical and backstage skills strand. We move on to the last slide, please. So very similarly to the other 2 ALIOs, we publish a range of documentation on our website, externally audited accounts, our Fair Work Statement, annual review and range of policies. Our attendance here at Scrutiny is regular, and we have regular and deep engagement with officers from both Perth and Kinross and Creative Scotland, who receive all of our board documents as well. You will all be aware that we have elected members on our board alongside the independent members, as well as observance by officers. We also have extreme levels of reporting to a range of funders. We have a very large range of external funders now, all of which receive evaluation on the projects that they support, which is no sort of minor feat actually, because increasingly they want to know what the impact is, and we sometimes use public evaluation. So you may well have seen the press article about the Mindspace project, which was a part of evaluating that project as well. But you know, the range and extent of what we do is perhaps not as publicly available, but there are quite severe capacity issues in terms of publishing all of that stuff as well. Thank you very much. I'm going to keep it tight as requested.
Thanks very much, both. Councillor Drysdale, you have a point of order.
Thank you, convener, and I'm not certain whether that's an appropriate point of order. However, I just, we've had a lot of information in these three presentations verbally, and it would have been helpful to have received that in advance of the meeting, at least some of it in terms of slides and what have you, to enable us to think about questions. We've had 20 minutes or half an hour of detailed information, and I personally find it quite difficult to process it all and formulate questions at the same time. So I just ask in future if through yourself, if that can be done in advance. Thanks.
Thanks. I think that's a good point. We could make sure next time to circulate presentations beforehand, because obviously you've provided them to the council staff. Okay, questions then. First question is from Councillor Allen.
Thank you, convener. My question is to Culture PK. Is it possible to go back to the first slide, please, Magda? Sorry, by the next one. Yeah, that one. Okay, so you're talking there about targeted marketing campaigns. I'm quite passionate about literacy and numeracy in youngsters. Can you tell me, is there any particular targeted marketing towards young people? And if so, how was that? Thank you.
Hi, thank you. In terms of targeted marketing, we don't tend to do a campaign such as this towards young people. We work on something called Every Child a Library Member, which is part of a national campaign. So we do that work directly with families through our BookBug and Rhyme Time programmes, through our BookBug gifting, where we actually send out to every child and every family in the region the book packs over their first 7 years. And we also engage obviously with our schools and encourage library use and library membership through there. When we have specific projects, we obviously work with the relevant groups and the relevant audiences to bring those young people or others into the projects. But this type of campaign probably isn't as visible to young people, and we find that it's much better to go through the routes whereby we have contact with their families and them directly.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Convener.
Thank you, and it's another one from a smout of CPK, so keep you on your toes. Thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you very much for all three of your presentations. Particularly like the way that Ms. Spout, you turned the hard to reach communities thing on its head by saying that as organisations we have to make sure that we're not hard to reach. So thank you very much for doing that. That gave good challenge to me. My question is
probably quite a straightforward one. You mentioned that within many of your venues you now have hublets. Would it be right in thinking there's some kind of customized tablet for receiving library information that's in the library? Is that what those are? Thank you.
Hopefully that works. Yes, so a hublet is just like any other tablet. It can be used, it has library information, it has a library catalogue, but people can also access the internet. It has a number of key apps on it, which we particularly hope people would use, but they can't use it in any way, shape or form. It also has a microphone and camera, so if they want to do a FaceTime call or Skype, they can use it for that as well. And what it happens is it can be put back into a docking station, and that wipes all the previous users' details, so nobody can access what they accessed, and also automatically charges it. And these can be unlocked by people without having to engage with staff, just using their, they scan their library card. So it's very similar to a tablet, and it's a way of extending the use, because people can take it into the children's play area, or sit down at a table, work one-to-one using a hublet in a way they might not be able to do with a standard PC or laptop.
Councillor Massey.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you for your presentation tonight. It's clear that the Culture Perth and Kinross are extremely busy at Alio. My question is on finance, particularly fundraising. Can you give an update on the progress of the fundraiser for Perth Museum?
Yes, so we have been engaged in a lot of fundraising, both for the museum and across the organisation. We've had several strands of fundraising for Perth Museum, fundraising for the conservation work, for a number of aspects for the displays and the presentation of the collections in the museum, and work towards mount making. So we are working towards a fundraising target at the moment of around £500,000, of which we're working towards, but we've also raised so far more than £260,000. So we have an additional 500,000 to reach, and work is undertaking on that. Our board are leading a lot of the fundraising activity towards asking individuals. We are about to launch a new website with a new fundraising landing page. We have a new fundraising officer in post, and we are working with a number of new projects, including membership schemes, patron schemes, and we hope to have a fundraising event at the end of May. So there's a lot of fundraising activity on go. It is a highly competitive market. There is a lot of people looking for a lot of money, and we continue to be confident that we will meet the targets that we need to meet, but we will be engaging with local businesses, corporates, as well as high net worth individuals over the coming months to increase the amount of contribution that they are making towards this project, from which everybody will benefit.
Thank you. Councillor Braun.
Success. We're on. Thank you, Convener. A question again for CPK. Excuse my back, if you will. There's no other way of doing this. It's in basically two parts linked together. First, regarding the needs of rural communities, on a specific note, there seem to be some concerns in Cooper Angus with the way the library system is working since the main building was closed. At the moment, I understand it's a collect and return through the local petrol station, and I just wonder what the future plans are to get that back onto a normal track. But leading on from that, from what you've said this morning with regard to digital services, newspapers, warm spaces and so on, it sounds as if the traditional concept of a library, that is going in, borrowing a book, reading it, taking it back, seems to be now becoming secondary or even tertiary. I'm not suggesting a name change, but it sounds like libraries are becoming more of a community hub, social hub than the traditional library. And I wonder if your thoughts are along that line. And if I may just lead on from Councillor Allen, are young people still using a library, or they tend to read books on digital means? Because obviously reading books is a way to command the English language. I'm sorry, it's a complicated question.
That's fine. We like complicated. So in terms of rural communities, we do have a commitment. We have a physical presence in 50 communities across the region every single week, whether that's through our mobile library service or through our physical buildings, and 102 communities over a fortnight period. So we are very visible and very engaged with our rural communities. The particular issue in Cooperangus relates more to the physical building itself. The services that are being delivered at the moment, a new mobile library stop is being launched next week in the village, and we are also in discussion with the Strathmore Hub, which you talk about libraries as being a community hub. What we don't want to do is have a secondary hub in an area where there's already something which is at the heart of the community. So it makes far more sense in this instance for us to have conversations with that hub and to see how we can extend provision. You're right, libraries are changing. Libraries have always adapted to the social needs of people around them. You know, they started off very much as being sources of information, and now very much the main use in terms of reading is fiction, or indeed self-help material. So we've always tried to adapt, we've always tried to change, and I think you're right, they have become much more of a community space, much more of a community focus, and the range of services people can access their library online 24/7 if they're lucky enough to be able to be online. So we need to have different parts of the whole. Some of that will be about physical services, some of it will be mobile services, some of it will be outreach and in the community, and it may be about going into a school, it may be about going into another community hub, but they will change and they will adapt. It's not that we need necessarily a building, what we need is the service. And if we can think differently about libraries not being physically based in a building, but actually being a set of services that can be delivered in a number of different ways to meet individual community needs, then I think we start to have a service that's fit for the 21st century. On the issue of young people, just to pick that one up, we do find that we get a lot of use for the under 12s. That tails off a bit in the secondary schools, partly because all the secondary schools have their own library and the resources that young people are accessing tend to be related to their own curricular needs. That picks up again after people have left university, and they come back with their own families, and the use, particularly over 50 use, is very heavy. What we find, though, is that people use this space, so they might not be borrowing, young people might not be borrowing from us, but they come in to study. And if you go into any of our libraries currently with the exam leave, it's crammed full of young people, slightly panicking, but doing lots of study. So they do still see it as a space they can be in and that they can engage in, but they may engage differently. And people will always engage with services at different times in their life for different reasons. And we need to be flexible and adaptable and able to meet that across a person's life. I think I've covered everything, but come back if not.
Thank you very much for the complete answer. Thank you.
Thanks. And just in case any of the other allios are feeling left out, Councillor Drysdale, you've got a question for all of them.
Thank you, convener. And yeah, my question is to all three allios. Next week, or the week after next, at full council, the council will be invited to note and approve its culture and sport, its strategic priorities for culture and physical activity and sport. We personally see well-being and culture and sport as an integrated concept. What collaborations are there presently among the three allios to deliver for the people of Perth and Kinross, and what can there be in the future?
I'm not sure who wants to kick this one off, but I was going to say let's let Culture Perth and Kinross come afterwards. So Nick.
Thank you. You know, to start with the Perthshire box office is designed to support collaboration, and we're doing all the ticketing for the Suter Festival through the pilot phase as a sort of starting point for how we collaborate with CPK into the future. We did have the conversation with Lal as well around their system, but their system is as complicated as our system in terms of what it does, so it's not a natural fit for an initial exploration, but very much designed as a project to support and collaborate, not just Alios actually, but the wider set of events across the region. I think as we move towards the opening of the museum next year, we've been talking about what we might do to offer, I suppose, additionality to visitors who come to the museum and where that might have a local resonance and relevance. Talking about, we will work on different programming cycles. So some of that stuff can be longer term thinking, and certainly we have been talking about whether we might do a play that is very directly relevant to an exhibition that's happening summer after next, without giving away any, too much clues. And I think that there's probably more that we can do around how our community activities integrate across all three Alios in terms of working with different groups and sharing knowledge and understanding, as well as where there might be joint activity. I think it's fair to say that coming out of the pandemic, we've all three of us faced huge challenges just to get the businesses back up and running. And so it's early days in terms of further collaborative opportunity, because we've had to focus on making sure that we can actually operate in a sustainable manner. But certainly Paul and Helen and I have very regular dialogue around what we're all doing and where we might go next together.
Thank you. Mr. Cromwell?
I would absolutely echo what Nick's just provided. We have worked together in things such as events such as Health and Wellbeing Weeks, and our teams have come together to make sure that we maximise impact for our community. There's practical elements. We've had discussions, but we need to formalise a little bit more about making sure that we sell Perth City. We have venues and facilities, and we need to make sure that we collaborate in terms of that, and we've had those discussions, but again, as I say, it probably needs to be formalised a little bit more. We cross-promote, and we have done that throughout the years in terms of events and activities that are happening. So I think there are a range of things that have been and that we have worked together on historically, but again, accept what Nick's already said in terms of there's more that we can do going forward to make sure that we are selling Perth and Perth City across the organisations.
Yeah, and again, I would echo that. I would also say that across our organisation, staff with common working interests do talk to each other and come together to see whether or not there are opportunities for synergy, particularly around things like operations, where we're looking at climate and what we might do in the future to make that more efficient, or indeed in terms of programming, to make sure that actually programming where it can be aligned is. I think there is, as always, more opportunities that will come down the track, but we have quite discrete areas of work, so sometimes it's not always easy to find those areas of collaboration, but where we can, we do. And we've done work with Horse Cross where we've collected oral histories from projects, and that's formed part of the collection, and that's been aligned to exhibitions and productions which they've had on in the past. And that kind of work I think is very important, and being alive to what each of us are doing and understanding that and seeking those opportunities for collaboration is something I think we're all committed to going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes next.
Amazing, it works. My questions are for Paul. And Paul, it occurred to me that you as an organisation have an obligation to do what I guess I could describe as good work for the community as well as make a profit, whereas your competitors only have to make a profit. And does that make it difficult for you?
We obviously have, what we try to do, and as part of our offer, is a balanced programme across the services that we provide, and to make sure there's no barriers to participation. So we have those social responsibilities as part of operating a business, though, there needs to be certain semi-commercial aspects of what we do, because we need to maximise the revenue that we generate to offset obvious higher costs that we're experiencing and haven't experienced for some time. So we operate in a competitive market in certain areas of activity. What we've got to do is make sure that we provide value, and we've got to make sure that we provide good quality facilities to make sure that we can compete with some of the commercial environment, because how we do that then is able to cross-subsidize other areas of our business and continue to provide the balance that we have across all the different areas. So it's a challenging sector that we're in, because there is additional competition, and even the investment that we've seen at Bell's, the significant impact that's made. And we talk about young people and price and promotion now. We've got a huge group of teenagers now, a significant amount of teenagers that have engaged in that facility. And it just shows to me that if you get the right offer and the right price point, then you've got a real opportunity of significant engagement. So yes, it makes it a more complex sector to work in, but that's part of the challenge.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Convener. I've just got a couple of questions. Hopefully they're relevant to first of all, to the culture. We obviously got a big rural area. How much engagement do we have, for instance, in the farming side of things? And can we, for instance, when you watch programmes on television like Springtime on the Farm, get more engaged to get our people from the towns, etc., into that sort of idea? I mean, you can see the problems that happened recently with dog attacks and lambs and things. Could that be something that you would think about in the future?
We can certainly think about how we can help share information and share key messaging. As I say, we do have a physical presence and we are in about communities all the time. Our mobile libraries, if you like, are sort of little trucks of joy that could be sharing more information, could be getting messaging like safety and countryside access rules out and about. Very happy to talk to anybody about that. In terms of engaging with particular communities, we sort of try to get a universal targeting in terms of things like libraries. Through our project work, though, we have done some work with farming communities. We've looked at particularly the berry picking. We had quite a big project and display with our archives and local history team looking at that. We've engaged with people, now I'm going to get the name wrong, but the Highland Cattle Society, and we had a display with them, and again about the farming traditions. So in terms of taking the story about the heritage and the contemporary activity, then we do look for specific projects and we do look for opportunities to engage around that. So those will come up from time to time, but we will always have a kind of universal ask of how can we engage with people more generally.
Could I ask one other one? It's to Live Active, really. There's so many more sports coming about nowadays. How would you go about making sure you're ahead of the curve type of thing? Now, what I mean by that is that I'm very much involved with a new sport which is huge and is gaining great movement forward. It's called pickleball. Now, as you know, it's a great sport. Yep. And how well do we go ahead rather than just saying we'll look at golf, we'll look at football? How far ahead do you look for these, or how do you go about trying to get new sports involved? Thank you.
I suppose it's a combination, and we do this across all our activities, and we, not only sports, all activities, which can be quite traditional, I suppose. But you're right, we still see the occasional new activity that just takes people's imagination. So some of that tends to be reactive. Some of it also tends to be the fact that we make sure that we're aware of what's happening in the wider sector, whether it's in the UK or further afield, because sometimes further afield eventually comes our way. And in terms of group fitness, it's very similar. Whilst we engage and look for customer feedback, it's also our role to inspire and actually present things that people haven't seen before and get people's engagement that way. So again, our team, whether it's our group fitness team or whether it's our sports team, are very much aware of what's happening in the wider sector, as well as responding to clubs and what's happening at a local level. So I suppose it's a mixture of understanding the industry, the sector, what's happening elsewhere, being part of, we're part of a wider body and a sector body called Community Leisure UK, looking at trends, and making sure that we can be flexible and agile enough to actually deliver them, and then make sure that we can roll them out and take the full benefit of it.
I'd just like to say thank you very much. And if you all want to take part in pickleball, it's something worth looking at. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Councillor Braun.
Yeah, we're on. Yes, the question for Paul, if I may, and we've touched on it slightly. We're talking about recovering of numbers. Last year saw big changes, obviously, with the development of Bells and the closure of Rodney. And my question is, and you just touched on it slightly earlier on, is has the change at Bells been as successful as you expected, and are the numbers increasing there?
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, I think we had 7 key areas in terms of the measures of success for that project, and we did a review just earlier this year. And yes, we were on target, even though we hadn't done obviously a full year's worth of operation with the facility opening last July. So our gym, the fitness gym usage has doubled in terms of what it was pre-facility, in terms of what the usage was like between Bells and Rodney. So it's been a huge success from that perspective, and it's certainly helping the recovery of our membership package as well, which, if we talk about in terms of finance and income, is essential income stream to the company. So it's worked really well. It's worked particularly well for some groups, which is creating some challenges, but it's a really positive challenge. We've also got school use. Obviously, the schools are using the facility during the day. Many of these groups now, as part of their part of the curriculum, are actually using the facility and the range of equipment we have. It's getting really positive feedback from everybody in terms of the experience. As I mentioned earlier, now we've got a fairly seamless journey from being able to book and pay online to be able to bypass fast stream past reception straight to the actual gym with the technology invested. So it's a really positive journey for customers as well. We still have some challenges around group fitness in certain areas. So we have a range of group fitness activities ranging from health and well-being through to high intensity training. As well as we have a spin studio, and our spin studio in particular has probably been the area that's not responded quite as well as we'd hoped. So we are actively monitoring our program at all times, and we will respond to that, whether that's a change in the program or a change in use. And again, we've got other programs that are oversubscribed, so we're actually looking at how we move things around to make sure that we maximise occupancy and make sure that we are managing our customers and the demand. There's a number of other areas that we looked at in terms of staffing as part of that project, which was obviously integrating the staffing between Bells and Rodney and reducing the staffing structure and therefore the costs and improving efficiency. They were all delivered. So in terms of the project, it's been a success. It's not over. It needs to continue, and we need to make sure that we continue to engage with our customers and make sure that we continue to shape that facility going forward, because it's an outstanding facility for us to have, and we need to make sure that we maximise the use and the income generation aspects of it.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, convener. A question for Helen. Helen, I'm sorry I'm sitting with my back to you. It feels very rude. A specific question, if I may, about a sort of switch from traditional books to digital books. And I'm a big fan of the library. I'm lucky I live quite close to one. I use it a lot. But I've been looking at the digital offering, and it doesn't seem quite as good. I guess that's a personal thing. But we don't seem to have such a good choice of books on the digital offering as you do in the library. Is that some kind of copyright restriction or something like that? And do you see any plans to change that so that more people can just download a book to their phone or their tablet in the future?
Yes, there are some restrictions in terms of the access to ebooks. Obviously, publishers want to make as much money as possible, so not every ebook is made available for public lending, and sometimes they're often made available after publication date. That's not true in every case, but it does restrict the availability. The number of different platforms we've worked to try and make our digital offer much more accessible. We have the new Libby app, and previously it was quite a clunky route people had to get through. So if we wanted to extend much further in terms of the number of titles available, we'd have to start using multiple platforms, and that becomes very difficult for users to navigate. What we have done is we've increased the number of titles that we hold on our e-service quite substantially. I think we've probably raised it by about 50% on what was there pre-pandemic, and we continued to develop that and push that as far as we can. However, the e-lending, whilst really useful, is still a very small proportion of what is borrowed from the library, and physical books still remain the main source of lending across the region, and those who use e-books and e-resources only are very, very small in number. Quite often people use ebook and physical book, or only physical book. Very few people only use the e-library service. So we do have to target our resources and our spend to reflect actual usage as well as growing usage. So that's perhaps why you're not seeing, we have some 500,000 titles, I think, on the catalogue in terms of physical books, and substantially less than that on ebooks. We wouldn't be able to replicate the same, unfortunately.
Councillor Carr.
Thank you. The question I'm going to ask is directed towards Culture Perth and Kinross, but could very well be relevant to the other organisations as well. With over 300 displaced Ukrainians already in Perth and Kinross and more being welcomed, are there any projects or plans for inclusion for a widening Ukrainian community within Perth and Kinross?
Yes, so it is a community that we're very aware of, and we have been working with PCAFs and with the Scottish Refugee Council and others to support, and again, forgive me, I don't know the exact title of the group, but there is a Ukrainian families group that we have been working with and engaging with. So we have increased the number of titles that are available in relevant community languages within the library. We've also increased the number of children's books in community languages, because we know from research that one of the best ways that people help settle in a new environment is actually to have access to home language material. So we've been providing that. We've also been working with the Scottish Book Trust to make sure that book bug packs and other materials have within them materials that are suitable for families. So there is a recognition of the changing population and people who are coming to live in Perth for various reasons, and trying to respond to those. But it is definitely quite a large community that we've been aware of, and certainly in each of our libraries we've been encouraging people to come in and use that as a space and to borrow the books that we have available for them.
Thank you. Vice Convener.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the answers so far. I just wanted to come with a question to each of the ADIOs actually. Who amongst you is already either publishing board meeting minutes, or has your board meetings maybe even open to the public? And if you don't do either, do you have any plans to do that in the future? So maybe starting on my left, if we could do that, thanks.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, yes, I can confirm that our minutes are published on our website and available. There's been discussions around what the meeting structure might look like going forward, but there's no formal plans at the moment to make the meetings open to the public at this time. Obviously, there's a range of sensitivities that we discuss at these meetings, and obviously consideration of that is paramount. So We are constantly looking at governance and making sure that we are accountable and that we're transparent going forward. And that's something that the board are very aware of and minded to. But at this time, there's no plans to open up the meetings to the public at this time.
At present, we don't publish our papers. They are available under Freedom of Information. It's something that we are considering, and I think it's a matter of time before we publish them on our website. As far as public at boards is concerned, we believe in accountability of the board, but Freedom of Information regulations also gives the board the ability to do its thinking in private. So I believe boards should be able to discuss quite freely the issues that come in front of it. I wouldn't like to see a situation where those discussions were done in private and the board was only ratifying those decisions. As far as the public participation board is concerned, the public elects use councillors to represent them, and we have 3 councillors on our board. We also have 3 observers from PKC who are paid to represent the public. As taxpayers, we receive funding from Creative Scotland. They also have a representative on our board. So we have 7 people oversight of our board representing public money. I think they do a good job. The acid test for me is our product. If the board's working well and the organisation's working well, our product will be bought by the public. We're seeing a 40% uplift in our target, our biggest income yet. It doesn't feel to me as if we're broken, so don't fix it. I wouldn't like to see a situation where the board discussion was in any way hindered. Our board operates well. I feel that if there was other people in the room, that would hinder an open discussion. We don't see a great requirement from the public to look at what we're doing. We have 1 or 2 Freedom of Information requests each year. They are generally from specific groups with an agenda. We don't see a great clamour for people wanting to attend our board meetings.
Yes, I would just echo what people have said. We don't currently have our board minutes on our website. In part, that's because we're reconstructing our website and we'll have a new one launched, and we'll give consideration to that. One of the problems that we have is just the amount of, I hate to use the word clutter, but the amount of documents that once we start to put that on the website, it does impact on the usability of the website as well. So we just want to manage how much information is there. So all of our risk information, all of our objective information, everything else is there. But we have a number of committees, a number of boards. It becomes quite a lot of information that's just sitting potentially on the website. So I think there are ways that perhaps we can be more creative about how the public engage in the governance. As has been mentioned, we do have the elected members. They are there and do very vocally represent the public very often in those discussions. And I think it's about continuing to keep ourselves in check about this as an issue and make sure that we are providing what people want and what they need and what they're interested in, and that we're being as transparent as possible in every other aspect of what we do.
Thanks. I'll put a last call for questions, but in the meantime, I have a couple. So the question that the Vice Convener asked was following up from discussions that we had at this meeting, sorry, at a prior meeting of this committee last year. So I just wanted to ask all of the LEOs again, how, when you had appeared last time at Scrutiny and Performance Committee, what did you go back and report on to your board meeting, and how do you go through the process of taking through any suggestions or recommendations, or for example, so you've had the discussions about having your board meetings in public, but the other points as well that were raised, how do you actually, what process do you go through to communicate that back to your board and come to some sort of a position on it? Anybody can go first. Helen?
Yeah, might as well. So Formally, we go back, and so at our board meetings, we'll say, and James will give feedback and a readout from the meeting as well, in terms of what was discussed, the issues that were raised. We do take a lot of notice as to what the interests of elected members are, the type of questions, what sort of things, how that aligns to council policy, to make sure that we are aligning our activity and our output to that. So it is discussed at board meetings. It will be raised again when we have our committee meetings. So if we're talking about a subject, we will refer back to questions that we've had at that point. So it's very useful to us in general. James may have something.
Yes, just to say that to answer your specific question, the board did discuss the issue of transparency, and Helen's given you the answer that we reached with that. So absolutely, there are a number of questions raised today. Some of them were very specific and don't require to be taken back to the board because we only have a limited time, but the ones that are more focused on strategy will be raised with the board, so that both matters from this committee and also we get considerable feedback from officers and other members on the board. So I'm fairly reasonably satisfied that that channel of communication is active and open.
Okay. Yeah, matters that arise here are generally discussed under the Chief Exec's report at the board meeting. Nick has mentioned about transparency and about public being at the board, and also whether we should publicise our board minutes. There was some brief discussion on that. There was no paper, so there's no recommendation and no action on that at this stage. I think it's just a matter of time before we do put a paper together. Like Helen, we're doing an awful lot with quite small resources, but I think it'll be a matter of, I can't speak on behalf of the board because they're not here, but I'd imagine it's a matter of time before we put our board minutes on the web.
Yeah, here we are. Thank you. We, whenever Paul or I are at outside meetings, which will benefit the board's further information, yes, we do report them. We do report them in papers or verbally. As you've heard, we already publish our minutes of the boards, and it's only recently started in the last 12 months, but we do, and we also have there are elements of the project of the minutes which we do keep confidential, which I think is a regular procedure. As I say, that when I have meetings, as I have a number of meetings in between board meetings, which are, if it's of relevance to the board, I discuss it. But Paul and I have a close working relationship, and I believe every element of openness is applied across all our business. I have to say there's a fair amount of change going on, probably in all areas, but certainly in Lyle at the moment, and we have been subjected to, as we all have, to an inevitable financial squeeze. It's put huge pressure on us, and so that's it. And just as an example, we had last night, Paul and I attended a meeting with curlers who use Dewars, and they came from all across the area, some from East Fife, some from Killin, coming in, and some certainly from further north, and there was over 120 curlers there. So that, we are corresponding, we're keeping in touch with our users as far as we can, and that gets reported back to the board. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm not seeing any. Do you want to come in on that point? No. I'm not seeing any further questions in the chat. I've just got one or two more. I was really interested, Ms. Williams, in the Perthshire box office, and I think you were talking about how it was
usable for events, and CPK were using it for the Suitor Festival. Is it only events, or could it be used as a venue booking system as well? And once you've got past your sort of beta phase, I think you already said that there were other organisations, but will you actually sort of open it up? So what I'm thinking of in particular is all of the individual little village halls, for example, which have to set up their own booking systems for you know, whichever organisation wants to use the venues. If that infrastructure is there, it would help our communities maybe.
It is very much a box office system, and it is built around a box office system rather than a space management system. In terms of your first point, it is entirely designed for any sort of event. It doesn't have to be cultural. You know, the model railway exhibition that's happening at Dewars in the summer is ticketed through it. We've been approached by a beer festival, ongoing ticketing through a nature reserve as well, and very much the users have their own back-end access, so they can administer it in a straightforward way. It doesn't have spatial capability because it's not designed for it. You know, we do have a space and resource management system that we use internally. I hesitate to say that that's the right thing for community groups running village hall use, because it is quite complicated. But you know, we have a number of systems that we can explore for wider application.
Thank you. And one to Live Active Leisure. You said that you'd got a 72% usage recovery, I think, following the pandemic, but nationally that was closer to 80 or 90%. What's the difference for Live Active Leisure, and how do we close the remainder of that gap?
Sorry, maybe picked me up the wrong. The national data we had at post-pandemic last year was that recovery expectations were expected to be for this last financial year around about the 72%, whereas we've managed to achieve 87%. So there's been further sort of state of the sector reports that have been completed towards the end of last year, which now have updated those initial findings to suggest that the recovery is around about the 80 to 90%. So I suppose what I'm saying is we're up at the 87, we're still going the right way, although it's slowed down in terms of the increase each month. But we're in the higher areas of what the sort of national information is providing, which is extremely positive. We have set ourselves at financial and usage targets going forward, understanding the challenges that we're in, but we're ambitious that we want to go beyond that. We've got some forecast challenges there, but we are, as hopefully I've gone through in terms of the presentation, we have a network there of terms of how we get people active, whether it's through our wellbeing or our sports team or our active schools teams and the venues. That's a network of activity all connecting and coming together to try and get people more physically active and engaged. So we still have ambitions. And we talk about pre-COVID, I suppose we're all eventually going to have to go change the baseline and say we've got a new baseline now. It's still a useful one for us to provide because it still provides that baseline from that point. We are still ambitious that we want to get back to that and above it where we can. We will need to have focus. Although we have an average of 87%, we have higher than that in some venues and some activities and lower than that in some areas and activities. And so we're going to have to really look at this on a very bespoke basis in terms of how we engage with the different areas and localities and activities to try and get that growth. And that's what we're going through our business planning process at the moment, and that's what we're going to focus on to make impact.
Great, thank you. Apologies for having picked you up wrong, but that's good to hear. And specifically, as well, maybe following up a bit on the community engagement, we have, when we've got a new build facility, so for example, Blair Rec, we have a user reference group. Do you have user reference groups on and Mr. McElhose, you were talking about getting the curlers together, but for facilities, do you have ongoing user reference groups to get feedback about, you know, I don't know, the timing of classes or the you know the state of the facilities and improvements that could be made.
I think the reality is we have all of those things. So we have specific groups in specific areas. So we have development groups and user groups in some areas and other areas where it depends what the activity is. Well, obviously, you know, there's a difference between having to engage with clubs and some of the issues that clubs may have in terms of facility access or supporting volunteers, to those maybe coming to classes that are looking to raise operational issues or requests for additional classes or queue management issues. You know, so there's a range of different issues and inquiries that we have to deal with, and what we have is a whole range of different ways that we engage with customers to resolve them and develop the business. In terms of a new building, obviously there's a customer reference group. We're obviously part of the project board for that. There's going to be some significant engagement required as we lead up to the opening of that venue, of which we will be you know, we anticipate there will be a significant lead on that. Now, that might well be a user reference group for that transition and for the opening of that venue. And that would seem sensible to me, that that's something that we would undertake in partnership with the council.
Great, thank you very much. There being no further questions, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the representatives of the ALIOs. Sorry for the public. Oh, I beg your pardon, sorry, you're right. Was it? Councillor Allen, sorry, I was going to invite you in for a comment.
Thank you, convener. This is specific to CP, the culture group, but please don't take slight the other two groups. I'd like to thank Helen for her comprehensive answers regarding engagement with our young people and the use of libraries. Clearly, library use goes way beyond visiting and borrowing a book, or at least I've learned that today. Library and library accommodation use is multi-generational, and I think it's incumbent on us all to look after that very important and continued existence of our libraries and our library services into the many years ahead. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. What I was in the middle of saying was apologies to anybody who's listening or watching online. When we talk about ALIOs, we're talking about the arm's length external organisations. So I'd like to thank the representatives, all 6 of you, from our 3 arm's length external organisations for coming along, giving your presentations, which I note were very responsive to the issues that we'd raised last time. So that's very encouraging. And thank you for giving your very full answers to the questions. My takeaways, I guess, from the answers that you've given, Mrs. Smout, the amount of mental health borrowing that's happening in the libraries, and the seeking for resources is obviously that's obviously a significant issue that we're going to have to be dealing with. But also on maybe a lighter note, I know that you've taken a leaf out of Perth Theatre and Concert Hall's Gig on a Truck, and you're now delivering little trucks of joy all around Perth and Kinross. Thank you very much for your attendance. Committee will take a recess. We will reconvene at 11:45, just to allow everybody to stretch their legs and allow our guests to leave. Thank you. Thank you and welcome back to this second part of the meeting. So we move on to item 6 on the agenda, the summary report on Care Inspectorate and Education Scotland inspections, and I'll ask Sharon Johnson to introduce the report.
Thank you very much, Convener, and good morning, everyone. This report provides an overview of the performance of Education and Children's Services inspected and reported over the past year by the Care Inspectorate and Education Scotland, and this is since the previous report of this type in 2022. I would just like to draw members' attention to section 4 of the report, which provides the background details of both the Care Inspectorate and Education Scotland inspection frameworks. And it also provides some detail of the local authority quality improvement framework carried out by officers in ECS. This supports schools and settings to ensure that continuous improvement takes place beyond the formal inspection process. Section 5 of the report provides an overview of the Care Inspectorate inspections in both of ELC settings, along with benchmarking data from our comparator authorities and against the national average. Details of the inspections by the Care Inspectorate for services for children, young people and families that have been inspected within the last year are also included in this report under section 5.2. And for the past year, this includes the inspections of the Council's fostering service, the Council's adoption service, and indeed the adult placement service. An overview of the ELC, the early learning and childcare settings and schools inspected within the year by Education Scotland is provided in section 5.3, and additional benchmarking information with comparator authorities is also provided where possible. There are a range of appendices within this report which give members a summary of the performance from both Care Inspectorate and Education Scotland inspections over time, and also relative to comparator authorities and national averages since 2016. Overall, this report provides assurance of good performance across all services, but also with a clear focus on improvement. Myself and Hazel Robertson, Head of Services for Children, Young People and Families, along with the Executive Director, are here to answer any questions members may have on this report. We also have Bernadette Scott, Service Manager for Early Years, and James Childs from our performance team. So a range of officers here, Convener, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Can I just ask about page 23, and it's the block of text next to the graph. It says the national trend down is linked to higher expectations from Care Inspectorate inspections and introduction of national standards for ELC. Does that mean that the desire to do better has gone up, but actually we're just kind of staying the same, or am I misunderstanding that?
Councillor Forbes, I'll ask Bernadette Scott to talk a wee bit about the national expectations, but indeed it's not that we're staying the same and that the national expectations have gone up. Because of the changes in the early years landscape and the 1140 hours, there was a whole reframing of the Care Inspectorate inspection frameworks, and they do have higher expectations now that we're moving into 5 years plus of delivering 1140. But Bernadette Scott will be able to give you a bit more information about that and also about our performance in relation to that.
Thank you, Sharon. Really just to add to what Sharon was able to explain, it really is around about the changing landscape and the move from 600 hours to 1140 hours, which has been a significant landscape for the sector. And as well as that, through the expansion of early learning and childcare, we now have 10 national standards that we have to pay attention to, as well as a new inspection framework. So there is increased expectations that are higher standards, quite rightly, but because of the pace of change, we are working towards that improving picture across the board. But clearly, you know, that's a journey and it takes time. So it's not that we are having lower standards, absolutely opposite. It's just that the landscape has changed quite significantly.
Thanks for that. I'm very reassured by that. If I could just ask you a specific question, it's regarding all of the graphs, I think. So I'm trying to work out where PKC is. The first graph on page 23 is PKC beside the light blue line, but I'm sure it tells me somewhere else where PKC are on the others. But is it fair to assume light blue line is always PKC?
Yes, I can confirm that the blue line. Sorry, are we looking at page 25, did you say?
Well, yeah, 25. So see the blue line and the black line. And I couldn't find, I'm quite sure it's in here and I just can't find it, but I couldn't find anything that told me which was which. And I just wanted clarification that the blue line is PKC.
They're actually both Perth and Kinross. In previous graphs, I think that there is a distinction between Perth and Kinross. So the dark blue line is where Perth and Kinross are performing at good or better, and the lighter blue line is the settings that are performing at very good or better. So it's just the way that data has been sectioned off. So 83% of settings that were inspected gained a good or better result, and 43% of settings gained a very good or better result. Does that so all of those in the graphs on page 25 and 26 are all Perth and Kinross Council data.
That clarifies it perfectly, thank you. And it also means I don't have another question on this, so thank you very much.
Could I just perhaps... Oh. Apologies, apologies, convener. Yes, I did wonder if I could just add another answer to Councillor Forbes, where he was asking where Perth and Kinross were sitting. So in terms of the appendices, you can see that within both ELC and primary schools, we've got a good range of information that tells us how we're comparing against our comparator authorities and our national average across Scotland. And Perth or Kinross are sitting above both of those in both of these areas. Councillor Forbes, thank you.
Thanks very much for that. Thank you.
Councillor Massey.
Thank you, convener. It's rather apt that we're looking at this report with the news that Rattery Primary School has received a glowing report from HM inspectors, so congratulations to them. And I would have imagined it's in no small part owing to the great that Perth and Kinross have a quality improvement framework working out with Her Majesty's inspectors, His Majesty's inspectors. My question is, out with the structured model of quality assurance and the learning and achievement visits by central officers, which may lead to universal or intense support being given to the school. And I also note that each school or early learning centre prepare their own improvement plan. Can I ask if a head teacher is to request support, if they feel they need it, will they receive it?
Thank you, Councillor Massey. You've just described our local authority performance framework, and what we do is we make sure that every school makes it certain that we are engaging with them throughout the year, irrespective of inspection processes, to help schools to make sure that they are providing a school improvement plan that they have worked with their school communities, with parents and with partners, as well as pupils, and that they also deliver a standards and quality report at the end of every year. So our quality improvement officers will do that right the way across the year. Every single school receives at least one visit per term from a quality improvement officer. And there's a range of other data that is looked at apart from the school visits, which would alert both head teachers and the quality improvement team to the kinds of support that a school might wish for. So absolutely, if a school requests support around any particular area of development, then they've got the right to ask for that. But in general, it's a conversation between schools and quality improvement teams as we go across the year to see where there are areas of strength and areas for improvement. And that is an ongoing situation across all schools every year. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, thank you.
Thank you, and we're on to Councillor Allen next.
Thank you, Convener. I'd like to come to page 16, and the words there are also represented in the graphs on pages 27, 28 and 29. Just give me a second to get that back. On page 16 of 522, says inspection evaluated the key questions. How well do we support people's well-being to be good? And how well is our care support planned? That's also good. I'm just concerned that we haven't asked the other questions and we haven't followed them up. And that's apparent in all of the graphs that are suggested on 27, 28 and 29. Why are we only asking specific questions and not all 5? Thank you.
I maybe can respond to that, Councillor Allen. This is the Care Inspectorate's inspection model. So we are inspected under what criteria they dictate, and these were the areas that they specifically looked at for this year. As it happened, the fostering service, and you can see from the graphs later in the table, have consistently done well over many years. There haven't been any concerns, and actually because of COVID and for other reasons, we hadn't had an inspection for 4 years. So we were really keen that this inspection would actually look at the areas concerned, but we don't have control over what is inspected. It's the Care Inspectorate that dictate that.
Councillor Massey again with the second question.
Thank you, Convener. In paragraph 431, within the text of it, there's a link to the education improvement plan. I've looked at that, and within that it mentions the Solihull approach. I've also looked at that, and it's a great approach to mental health. Can you elaborate a little bit for me on that?
I'll answer that one, Councillor Massey. The Solihull approach is an approach that we've invested in over a number of years within Perth and Kinross, and it is an approach that supports parents and carers in their relationships with their children, really from birth to 19. And as part of the early years expansion, we took the opportunity to be, I think, very invested in Solihull, where we looked at training officers, and we trained some early years staff, and indeed with other partners across the early years landscape. We've also then taken that through with the parenting and family learning team and are investing even further in this approach because we do believe that it has really positive gains. Ben Scott, who is the early years service manager and who also manages the parenting and family learning team, has put in place some additional measures around the Solihull approach, and I'll ask her to just give a bit more detail around that.
To again add to what Sharon's been able to share so far, as part of the expansion of early learning and childcare, we did prioritise this as an important area to focus on. So we currently have 20 trained trainers, so that we are taking a sustainable approach to ensuring that we can continue to train our staff, and we currently have 400 staff trained in this approach, which is really an approach that's about improving communication and building positive relationships with children, young people and their families. And we're hoping, actually we're not hoping, we are into next year planning to take it from the early years out into primary schools and targeted secondary school staff. And we are going to be hoping to invest in a programme which allows us to target more school staff in their own context. So we'll be investing in a school programme where staff teams can actually learn and develop together around about this important area of working with parents to support children.
Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, convener. I've got two questions. I'll just ask one at the moment, and you can tell me when I can ask the second one. Actually, my question relates to first time for me the annex to the paper rather than the paper itself. Under communication, there is set out an explanation of what happens in the case of an initial Education Scotland inspection of a school, that a public meeting is held, elected members are invited, parents are invited, so on and so forth, and members of the Learning and Families Committee also attend. Are you able to tell me, just in general terms, how well attended such events are, and do we feel that that is the best way of communicating findings of inspection reports?
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. It does range very much depending on the schools, and in some cases, in fact, we've had very few members of the parent body come along to public meetings. It isn't the only way that we communicate findings, of course, but we do feel it's an important one that the head teacher and the elected members and the parent body are given the opportunity to come together in person to discuss the report and look at the areas of strength and the areas for further development. But of course, as soon as an inspection is published, then that is shared by Education Scotland with the parent body. We do that through the schools. So the report as it stands and is written is sent to all parents. The head teacher then presents a report to the parent council, and it's discussed in a range of other ways. And so therefore, when we're looking at school improvement plans, any areas for action within an inspection report will be discussed with the parent body and our pupils, in fact, because these will be going into the improvement plan for the following year as actions. So there's lots of ways that we would want to engage with our school communities on terms of inspection. And although our public meetings are sometimes not well attended, we do think they're an important part of the scrutiny and the accountability of the school and the local authority to the parent body.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, convener. On page 31 at table 3, and then followed up again on page 35 with its own graphic, it would suggest that, I know the bar is low, there's only 6 schools here, but suggesting we don't have any secondary schools that are either good, very good or excellent. Is that something we should be concerned about? Thank you.
Okay, I'll ask Sharon Johnson to come in, but just to clarify, I think that's 6 indicators in 2 schools rather than 6 schools, but Sharon Johnson.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Allen, Councillor Stewart has just clarified that setting, but what the other appendices do further down, Appendix E, provides a summary of the quality indicators and the gradings that our schools have received. And what we have in Perth and Kinross is only 2 secondary schools who have been inspected since 2016 that we're able to report on. And that is far fewer, obviously, than the number of schools that have been inspected either at ELC, which is inspected very often, and primary schools, which are inspected more often because we have more of them. And so therefore we've only had 2 school inspection reports at this time. So it's not that we don't have good and excellent schools, it's that during the inspection what we have is 2 schools that have not yet received a good evaluation. But that's quite different from making an assumption that our schools are not good or excellent. We do expect, in fact we've just had an inspection of an all-through school. Pitlochry High School was inspected last week, although the results are not yet published. But we do expect that more of our secondary schools will be inspected, and we will be able to make some judgments over time as those schools become inspected.
Okay, thanks. And I'll maybe just follow up on that, if that's okay. Could just for clarity, which were those two secondary schools, and when were those inspections done? Because obviously this covers a multi-year period.
Yes. So Perth High School, the report for Perth High School was they were inspected in January 2019, so that was quite some time ago, and it was before COVID. And then Perth Grammar School were inspected just in February 2020, just as COVID was hitting. So these were the two schools that were, two secondary schools that have been inspected up to now, Councillor Stewart.
Thanks very much. So obviously those are, that's quite historical information that we're looking at in terms of the quality indicators there.
Yeah.
And can I just check, is our Education Scotland looking to ramp up the number of inspections? You've mentioned that Pitlochry has been done. How many more could we, for the secondary schools, could we expect over the next year or academic year?
Yeah. It's not really clear. What Education Scotland have said is that they're resuming their normal inspection regime, and they usually inspect around 200 to 250 schools per year across Scotland. And in general, we would expect 5 or 6 primary schools to be inspected, and less so, obviously, as you can see, we've only had 2 secondary schools inspected, and obviously with COVID, pausing inspections. So what Education Scotland have said is that they're going to continue with their usual number of inspections. We just don't know when and how many that is going to entail within Perth and Kinross, but we've had one of our all-through schools inspected already. It's quite possible that there could be another inspection this year.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions from members? Councillor Drysdale. Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes, sorry, Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you. Quite a difficult question to try and frame here, and I'm not wanting to put anybody on the spot with this one, but we have all. And sorry, I should say that also I'm very well aware that Perth and Kinross Council is excellent in its care of its staff. Nationally, there was an issue that was all over the media just last week about this very sad case of a head teacher who's appears to have taken her life in response to a negative finding of a school inspection. I guess what I'm asking for is what kind of assurances can the committee receive about the quality of support that is offered to those leaders of these schools, etc., in particular, in the event that they do face a potentially disappointing outcome of an inspection. I'm just anxious to ensure that measures are in place to support that individual in such circumstances.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. We've been in the fortunate situation that we have never had a school that's received the lowest grading, but we are aware, obviously, as is Education Scotland, that any inspection process is an extremely stressful time for the head teacher and indeed for the school. Education Scotland have made significant changes to the way they inspect over a number of years, and they make sure that they liaise very closely with the local authority prior to an inspection to be aware of any particular issues that they might need to be aware of. Our head teachers over recent years have reported that the inspection process has changed significantly, and they feel much better supported in the dialogue that they have with Education Scotland inspection teams, and of course the Quality Improvement Officer is available throughout the process. But where it's obvious that the gradings, and within Perth and Kinross we do expect gradings of good or better, and anything below a good from a school receiving a satisfactory or a weak does require an action plan from us as a local authority, and then we follow that up with parents a year later. So where there is an evaluation of good or less, we always make sure that there's really very good support within the school for the head teacher and for the inspection team. And so therefore, where staff and their ability to manage an inspection, we certainly have that conversation with Education Scotland. And although we do not, have any detriment to the quality of the inspection and the standards, what we do is we make sure that we manage that situation as sensitively as possible. And so we feel we've got a very good support system. Feedback from our head teachers is very similar. They always thank the inspection team, where there's been a good range of dialogue and support from HMI, but also with our Quality Improvement Officer team, who do spend a great deal of time with every school, both before, during and then after an inspection process. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may, thanks very much for that reply, and thanks also Executive Director Devlin for the paper that she has sent on the chat for members to have a look at on this sensitive and very important issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions from members? No. Are there any comments on the report from members? Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. Just a very quick thing to say, and it's already been touched on, I think, earlier on, but if I can take the opportunity to congratulate Rattery Primary School for the recent successful report. The school is in my ward. This reflects the hard work of the staff, the pupils and the parents in that community and their dedication to learning. And there should be recognition of all Perth and Kinross officers who have maintained support to the school, and they're not insignificant work for which they should also share in the success. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. If there are no other comments, the recommendation was for us to scrutinise and comment as appropriate on the contents of the report. Can we agree the report? Thank you very much. And last item on the agenda is item 7, the Perth and Kinross Health and Social Care Partnership Clinical and Care Governance Assurance Report. To explain briefly to members, a joint clinical and care governance assurance report is written covering both the health and the adult social care aspects. That report goes to the Care Governance Committee at NHS Tayside for scrutiny of the health aspects, which then reports into the and provides assurance to the Audit and Performance Committee of the Integration Joint Board. We haven't so far heard the adult social care aspect reported to a committee of the council, and that is why this is the first time that this is in order to fill that gap. That is the first time that this report is coming to the Scrutiny and Performance Committee today. I'm going to ask Mr. Kenny Ogilvie, who is the acting head of adult social care, social work and social care from the Health and Social Care Partnership, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm joined online by the Clinical Governance Coordinator for the Health and Social Care Partnership, Mark Dixon. As Councillor Stewart said, the purpose of this report is to provide assurance to Perth and Kinross Council Scrutiny and Performance Committee on the clinical care and professional governance of the Perth and Kinross Health and Social Care Partnership. And this report covers the time frame between the 1st of November 2022 and the 28th of February 2023. The Health and Social Care Partnership's Care and Professional Governance Forum meets regularly, and together with locality, professional and care governance groups, It provides assurance regarding clinical care and professional governance for services across the Health and Social Care Partnership, including Tayside-wide services, which Perth and Kinross Health and Social Care Partnership is the lead partner for. Quality assurance is assessed against 6 governance domains, and they are information governance, professional regulation and workforce development, service user, carer and staff safety, service user, carer and staff experience, quality and effectiveness of care, and the promotion of equality and social justice. Operational risks are recorded in a register, and red risks are discussed at every meeting. As at the 17th of March 2023, the red risks were accommodation, mental health medical workforce, GP cover in HMP Perth, mental health waiting times in prison healthcare, capacity and flow, and care at home capacity. Services provide exception reports to the Care and Professional Governance Forum on rotation, and between November 22 and February 23, exceptions were reported in prison healthcare, North Locality, Perth City, and the Public Dental Service. Services also provide annual reports on rotation, and during this period, reports were received from Secretary of Old Age, the South Locality, Mental Health Officer and Wellbeing Service, the Access Team, and the Public Dental Service. The main themes from adverse events recorded on DATIX are slips, trips and falls, medication, challenging behaviour, violence and aggression, and pressure ulcers, and there is one ongoing significant adverse event review relating to a person who completed suicide. The main themes from complaints received regarding Perth and Kinross Council services during this period are service provision to do with employees, communication or related to policy and procedure. Adult support and protection referrals continue to increase, and to mitigate that, extra social workers have been recruited to respond to this, and it should be noted that we are still able to respond within timescales for 97% of referrals. Other highlights include the medication assisted treatment standards to support people with opiate substance use. These are national standards which we are implementing locally, and we're progressing with implementation of the 10 standards. The deadline for implementing the first 5 standards was earlier this month, and we have submitted a report to Scottish Government. We're just waiting on feedback there. There's also a lot of work underway to improve substance use services out with the MATS programme, and also there's information in the report showing that the drug trend, the death trend in Perth and Kinross is down. All services, in summary, all services are facing increased demand. There's particular pressure in mental health and capacity and flow in hospitals. A number of transformation programmes and individual actions are being taken to respond to this. Workforce remains one of our biggest risks. There's a high number of vacancies across the partnership, with social care and nursing in particular. A 3-year workforce plan is being implemented to try and address this. And for example, a recent promotion campaign for social care posts resulted in over 80 people applying, and to date we have appointed 22 people on the back of those advertisements. So to sum up, the lead officer for the Perth and Kinross Health and Social Care Partnership would suggest the level of assurance provided is reasonable assurance. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ogilvie. First question is from Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Convener. And Mr. Ogilvie, you kind of just finished with what my first question was going to be, because those words jumped straight out at me, reasonable assurance. Where does that sit on the scale of what we could expect? Is it near the bottom, the top, the middle? And are we happy with reasonable assurance, or should we and could we do better?
I mean, we can always do better, but it's more to the middle or top of the scale. I don't know if my colleague Mark Dixon wants to come in with more detail on that.
Yeah, thank you. So within the report, I believe it's about halfway through, there is a table. So it's just before the conclusion and recommendations section, and there's the table giving the 4 levels. So no assurance, limited assurance, reasonable assurance, and substantial assurance. So there's 4 levels, of which we're at 3 of 4.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson. Councillor Robertson, you're on mute.
My question was about on the pressures with regard to workforce. There's one of the themes running through the report is that in a number of areas that our service is constrained by lack of personnel. Now that must lead to quite a, if that money is not spent on staff wages, what actually happens to all the unspent money? Does it build up into reserve, or is it used to try and address through agency staff the shortage of staff that you face?
A bit of both is a short answer. Some of it does go into reserves, but obviously we try and recruit wherever possible, and we are using agency staff across the partnership at the moment. Obviously that is something we're trying to address and replace with permanent posts, because it's not the most cost-effective way of delivering services, but unfortunately needs must, and certainly in nursing and social care, the two main areas that I highlighted there, we are using agency staff to try and plug some of the gaps that we currently have, but hopefully that will be a short-term solution.
Councillor Allen.
Okay.
Thank you, convener. On page 37, it talks about reasonable insurance. The dates considered were 1st of November 22 to 20th February 23. Just like to point out on page 39, we're suggesting the risk was last reviewed on the 17th of March 2023. There's a suggestion in the third paragraph that interim chief executive of Perth, Kinross, has been briefed. I know it's probably been pedantic, but I don't think we had an interim chief executive at that time.
Thanks, Councillor Allen. I think in the table that you're referring to, that's a chronological list of actions that have been taken to control the risk since it was originated. So that reference to the interim chief executive would have been right when the action was taken, presumably when Director Renton was acting as chief executive of the council. Mr. Ogilvie is nodding in agreement, so I've got that one right. Your second question, Councillor Allen.
Thank you. On page 41, under the cover for GPs at Her Majesty's Prison Perth, we're suggesting that the current risk score is 20. It's red, and the current score is higher than the inherent score due to the exacerbations of risk by the last remaining GP giving notice to leave the post. At the bottom of that column, it suggests that locum GP arranged to cover shifts over the coming months, and that 11 new GPs are now available. Does that mean that the risk has been mitigated?
Yes, in short, the risk has been mitigated and it has been reduced. But again, it's just the timings as well. As at the 21st of February, the risk was red, but since then, because obviously there is a delay in preparing the paper and actually presenting it, since then there has been a good response to the recruitment of locum GPs, and we now have the shifts covered at HMP Perth. So the risk has been mitigated. But again, what we're looking for is a longer term model, so we're not relying on locum GPs on an ongoing basis.
Councillor Broad.
Thanks, convener. Coming back to something touched on by Councillor Forbes and looking at the various risks we have, all of them have noted red on them. And we've also said in the paper we have severe staff shortages in various areas. My question is the assessment of reasonable assurance optimistic? Should we be a little bit lower than that, to be honest?
I mean, the partnership consists of a very, very wide range of services. So again, there are a number of red risks there. But again, I suppose what we have to take into account is that the whole gamut of services out with those 5 that are stated as red, that are amber or green.
Just follow on a separate subject, but I mentioned the staff shortages. What is there a major problem with we have so many shortages? Is it lack of salary or it's not interest in that sort of work? What is the sort of the core problem?
I mean, again, it's a national issue, certainly across Scotland and probably across the whole of the UK, especially, and I keep at the risk of repeating myself, the two areas in particular, social care and nursing. But you know, there's also a shortage of medical staff as well and allied health professionals. So it's basically across the board, and the situation is probably worse in a lot of areas than it is in Perth and Kinross. But again, with Perth and Kinross, you know, we are pretty much on the edge of the central belt. We are competing with neighbouring areas as well for staff. I mean, at the moment, we have approximately 50 nursing vacancies in the Health and Social Care Partnership. And if we were to meet all our unmet need for care at home, we would need over 100 extra staff. Like I say, we do have a workforce plan. We are in the process of recruiting to a dedicated post to support the implementation of that plan. There are a lot of actions in there to try and address this, but yeah, it's making sure our terms and conditions are competitive, making sure we've got, you know, really good sort of career structures, and making Perth and Kinross as attractive a place to work as possible. So yeah, there are real challenges there. Like I say, we have made fairly good progress in certainly social care recruitment, and the nursing recruitment is increasing as well. So things are improving, but there's a lot of work still to be done.
Thanks. And worth just, as you say about the social care recruitment, particularly in the HEART team, the home access and rehabilitation. Home assessment and recovery team. I didn't get that one right. Apologies. So next question is Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Convener. My question is on page 60 regarding getting people discharged and into a care home situation. Now, what I would like to know is, do you have the support in place in these care homes so that if anyone has a situation like, for instance, they need trachea care, like tracheoscopy, is that in place, and can they get them out of hospital when there's no need to be in there? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we do everything we can to discharge people from hospital as quickly as possible, and then try and do what we can to ensure they're not readmitted to hospital unless it's absolutely necessary. I mean, we do have minimum standards of care that we expect from our nursing homes, but the partnership also provides considerable support to the care homes as well, to support people if they're, as and when their needs deteriorate. And that includes supporting with specialised nursing staff's tasks and medical staff's tasks, etc. And we do have a team of dedicated enhanced care home nurses. That is their specific job, to support the care homes and make sure they are providing as high quality of care as possible to people as and when their situation declines as well, to try and make sure they are able to remain in the care home rather than be readmitted to hospital.
So can you tell me that if they have facility for someone who has a tracheoscopy to actually get out of hospital, do they have that there or do they not have it?
Nursing homes can provide care for people with tracheostomies, yes.
Thank you. Vice Convener, I apologise for missing you out.
Thank you. My question is about the risk number 982, mental health medical workforce in Perth and Kinross HSCP. Within that one, it's still rated at red, yet there's a narrative there that says that the contingency team was stood down on the 29th of November 2021. Just wondering if I'm reading this correctly and understanding this correctly, that the contingency team was stepped down, but then we're still at red, and if so, what further action is needed to get us away from red? Thank you.
The contingency team was stepped down, but it still is in a serious situation, which is why it's still at a red risk, and we still do have a fairly severe shortage of mental health medics as well. Ideally, we would have consultants aligned to the individual localities in Perth and Kinross, but we're having to actually pool them, and they're operating centrally at the moment, and unfortunately that will be the situation. I'll have to remain until we can actually get the vacancies recruited too. But at one point it was actually centralised for the whole of Tayside, so we are in a slightly better position, but we still need to recruit to more posts to actually get back to the model that we prefer.
Thank you. I think it's Councillor Forbes next.
Thank you, Convener. Page 61 is a graph. I hope I've got my graphs right this time, because I clearly got them wrong at the last paper. But I think it shows us that drugs death in Scotland are stubbornly high and still increasing. Yet in Perth and Kinross, they seem to have dropped off significantly very recently. I'm wondering what we're doing well to get that welcome result, and is that something we could share with the Scottish Government to help other local authorities?
I mean, we certainly are tapped in to local government initiatives, especially through the MAT standards as well. So we are tapped into national networks, and we do share the good practice in Perth and Kinross. There's been significant investment in substance use services in Perth and Kinross over the last few years. And we have made a number of improvements. For example, we've implemented a non-fatal overdose pathway. We have integrated our substance use team. We've also implemented a multi-agency assessment and triage clinic as well, and that includes health, social work and third sector. So there's been a lot of improvement in service provision, plus there's been an increase in capacity as well. We have had extra funding from Scottish Government, and as well as the redesign of services, we have increased capacity. And this is one area where we have actually managed to recruit too. Obviously, the trick is now to make sure we retain those staff. So a good part of that will be the improvement in services. Again, if a statistician was here, they would say, thankfully, they're relatively low numbers in Perth and Kinross. So there may be a wee bit of statistical noise in there. But like I say, there has been significant investment and significant improvement in substance use services over the past couple of years in Perth and Kinross.
Is that both of your questions? All right, good. Okay. Councillor Drysdale then.
In that case, if I've got my first and my second question, if that's okay. Yeah, two separate questions, Kenny, if I may. And first of all, Convener, I'm delighted finally to have an opportunity to properly scrutinise this important aspect of the services that we provide. So thank you for facilitating that. The first question is something that has already been touched on in an earlier question, but just I wanted to come at it from a different angle, I guess, in a way. One of the red risks is around mental health waiting times within the prison healthcare service. Firstly, I understand that the upcoming inspection of HMP Perth will include some degree of review of the health-related services in the prison. However, I'm just curious as to why on one point in the paper we're saying that the managers of red risks provide a written update at every meeting, and yet this risk, which is, as I say, a red risk, has not been reviewed for since January. Can you clarify why that is, and can you give an assurance that that we are on top of this and doing all we can to resolve the issue?
I might bring my colleague Mark in here. I think this is down to a system. This one of the dates will be when the risk was updated on the DATEX system, but I can certainly confirm that all the risks are reviewed and discussed at the Care and Professional Governance Forum, and we had a forum just a couple of weeks ago, and this risk was discussed then. And I can assure you that we are taking all actions that we can to try and address the risk. I'll maybe bring Mark in just to confirm that.
Yes, thank you. So that's correct. So we use a system called DATEX for capturing the risks and the list of controls that are listed there in the paper. So But we do get verbal updates from the risk managers for the red risks and the amber risks actually on every second meeting. So yes, we will have had verbal updates in terms of this risk at our care governance meetings.
Okay, thanks for that reassurance. My second question was with regards to the public dental service, and again, there has been recent news coverage about the situation in England and Wales, which is extremely serious, and I know it's has its difficult areas here. There's a comment in the paper at page 46 that says increase in the number of unregistered patients trying to access the public dental service for unregistered care. So I'm assuming that there is a difficulty locally in Perth and Kinross in that regard as well. And again, can you explain what is being done to try to tackle that, given the usual recruitment and retention pressures that exist? Thanks.
Thanks. And again, it's important to remember the public dental service covers the whole of Tayside. So again, these comments refer to the whole of Tayside, and my understanding is there are issues in Perth and Kinross, but the issues are more severe in other parts, Dundee in particular. And in terms of the public dental service, there are issues with accommodation that are mentioned there, but that's more in King's Cross and Dundee. I mean, I believe there is work being done nationally to try and improve access to NHS dentists by increasing capacity. In terms of specific details, I don't have any. I can bring Mark in. Mark, have you got further details?
I suppose really for this one, it's just for NHS Tayside to be aware of the risk in that if dental practices decide to go private, and all of those patients potentially for a while will be able to access the public dental service and be accommodated through that route. So I suppose it's just for NHS Tayside to be aware that that is always a possibility, and to make sure there's the capacity within the public dental service to be able to pick up the patients that have a right to access that service.
Thank you. If I can just follow up and just say, thanks for that. And I appreciate that. I'm asking questions in respect of Perth and Kinross with this particular hat on, and I have to say that personal family experience of the Broxden facility has been superb, and we are very fortunate to have that. If we live locally. And its availability 7 days a week is also excellent as well. So, but I do hope that we can, and I'm sure we are, doing all that we can to improve the service across the wider Tayside area, given the IJB's responsibility in that regard. Thanks.
Sorry, it was just to confirm what Mark said there. Certainly in terms of the Health and Social Care Partnership, as you know, its public dental service is the service that Perth and Kinross is the lead partner for. And yeah, it's just flagging up the risk relating to any impact on the public dental service that a lack of NHS dentists may have. And when people can't access an NHS dentist, they then can go to the public dental service. And to date, certainly in Perth and Kinross, Broxden has been able to cope with demand, but it is increasing fairly significantly. So as Mark said, it's just about highlighting that risk there and trying to increase the capacity of and access to NHS dentists, just to make sure, we're not getting to the point where people can't access support at the public dentistry.
Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Convener. I'm on page 44 and I'm reading about the routine waiting time at HMP Perth, and it says it's reduced from 27 weeks to 4 weeks. Was 27, is that accurate? Were people actually waiting 27 weeks to see a doctor?
Mr. Ogilvie.
Yes, unfortunately they were. And obviously, any requests for GPs were triaged in critical cases where we're seen obviously as soon as possible. But yeah, unfortunately, the knock-on effect was that the less serious and less risky cases, people were waiting a significant length of time. Thankfully, that has now reduced, but yeah, the figure is correct.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Convener. Following 2.4, talking about quality and patient care over pages 59 and 60. On page 60, at paragraph 3, you suggest there's a risk to patient safety and staff well-being if a decision is made to stop agency usage across our services as part of the Scottish Government Supplementary Staffing Agency controls. This has been escalated to our executive team and through professional structures. I'm just trying to find out, have you got any further information or updates on this situation?
And again, this relates purely to the health services. It doesn't relate to any use of agency for social care. And nationally, there is a drive to try and reduce the reliance on agency staff. And you know, there is an issue. There's a shortage of a range of health professions out there, and you know, as is people's rights, lots of people are choosing to work for agencies because you know the rate of pay is much higher. There's more flexibility, etc. But yeah, there's only so many staff out there. There are numerous vacancies across NHS, across a number of professions. And you know, just trying to find a way of trying to support people into the permanent jobs rather than working for agencies. And again, it was mooted. You know, the more we can reduce the use of agency staff, the more that will encourage people to engage in permanent contracts with NHS. But in terms of an outright ban, I think something has been lost in translation. And certainly my understanding currently is there are no plans to just stop the use of agency staff in our NHS facilities in Perth and Kinross overnight. You know, if there is a reduction, it will be phased, and risks and clinical risks will be assessed on an ongoing basis. And you know, if agency staff are required to ensure that risk is kept at an acceptable level, then that will continue.
Thank you. Thanks for your answer.
Thanks. And worth as well, I suppose, Mr. Ogilvie pointing out, just to point out that there is a further, aside from the financial risk of using locum or agency staff, there's also a continuity of care element. So particularly, for example, if we're talking about the mental health or learning disability overspends, then you know, if patients are continually seeing different staff from an agency or different locum staff, that doesn't contribute to the best patient experience either. Councillor Forbes, another question.
I think you'd be pleased to hear this is my last question. I'm on page 48, and it says the service's ongoing challenges with regards to Lloyd's pharmacy contract and issues with medication deliveries. I'm surprised that we're not supplying drugs through the NHS like a hospital would, but I guess that's the decision that's been made. And can you give us any further information on what the problem is and when this is likely to be resolved?
Yeah, thank you. We received an update, I think it was just last week. Yeah, the issue has been resolved. They have now identified a preferred provider for the national contract, so that contract has now been signed off, and understanding it will be implemented in the near future. So it has been resolved. Certainly, in terms of services provided in the prison, you know, there was no risk. The problem was it impacted on the staff that were there, and it took up their time, which they could have been spent. It could have been used in other ways, you know, for supporting people with mental health issues, etc. Because of this contract and it not working properly, they spent more time administering medication. But like I say, there is now a national resolution which will be rolled out in the prisons in Perth and Kinross as well. So that will be resolved fully in the very near future.
Thanks. Does that mean that there's a new contract in place and somebody other than Lloyd's is running it, or is it just a different way of working with the same organisation?
I'm not sure who won the contract. I don't think it's Lloyd's, but it is another provider that's coming in to take that one. That's my understanding. Am I correct, Mark?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Last call for questions. I'll ask one just to follow up, I think, on Councillor Braun's question about the level of assurance. So obviously we can see what the red risks are, but you indicated there was a lot of other services being delivered. So how many other risks are there which are not at this level? Just to give us a sort of, maybe it's a question for Mr. Dixon rather, Mr. Dixon.
Yeah, so in addition to the red risks, and I think it is further on in the report, the full list of risks certainly for health. So I think at the time of this report there were 30. That's since reduced. So, so in answer to your question, other than the 5 red risks that are there, there's an additional 25 for health services, and for social work, I think it is just that 1 red risk. Things have kind of moved on a wee bit since this report was finalised. It has reduced a wee bit, but yeah, it's in the order of around 30 that covers our red, amber, and green risks.
Great, thank you very much. If there are no other questions, are there any comments? Oh, Vice Convener. Oh, apologies. My chat's not updating enough. Vice Convener and then Councillor Ford.
I think to thank for the report, and also just I think something around the wording and the formatting of the report that I found this report a little difficult to get into. I found the timelines quite difficult. It came up in some of the questioning where these things are, like a chronological history. Maybe some approximate dates would be useful. And I do appreciate this is a report that historically has gone to a room full of either experts or people who've had time, such as Councillor Stewart, to read themselves into the subject. So it's a little challenging as a relatively lay person to get into it. So I think a plea really for something that's a bit easier for a lay person to read and understand. Thank you.
Thanks. Bailey, actually, I shouldn't have let him go first because he said kind of what I was going to say. I was going to go a little bit further. And there's a few things that jump out at me from this report, as well as it being very complicated, and there's a lot of it I just didn't understand. But I'm concerned that the word locum is used frequently, and I think, Convener, you alluded to that earlier on today. I'm absolutely horrified to see that prisoners are waiting for 27 weeks to see a doctor. I mean, I'm very lucky. I've only seen a doctor once in 30 years, and I had to wait 8 days. I was horrified at waiting for 8 days, so I would be absolutely furious to wait for 27 weeks. I find the whole structure of the Health and Social Care Partnership incredibly confusing. I think, as you'll know, there's an issue in Invergowrie, which I'll be very careful not to say too much about at this point in time, but I think Bailey will have the same level of contact from his constituents as I do. And I genuinely don't know how the whole system functions. And yeah, I found this report as complicated as the whole system behind it. So I agree with what Bailey said. I think whilst there's really good news in there, and I want to thank the officers both for giving us really clear and very concise and very short answers to our questions, for which I'm grateful. I still find the whole process incredibly complicated. And to then just finish off now, if I can, on dental treatment, I'm delighted that Councillor Drysdale has an excellent dentist nearby. I can't get an NHS dentist anywhere near I live, and as a result have to pay for it. Thank you, Convener.
Thanks, Councillor Forbes. I take on board the point about the health and the structure of the Health and Social Care Service, Health and Social Care Partnership, and also, for example, as came out in the questioning, the fact that dentistry is a responsibility of the Health and Social Care Partnership, but for the whole of Tayside, whereas obviously we are Perth and Kinross councillors, so it might be worth exploring a briefing session just on the Health and Social Care Partnership and how it operates for all elected members, not just for members of the Scrutiny and Performance Committee. Next comment, I think, is from Councillor Allen.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, I'd just like to say that it's a very comprehensive report. It did take quite a bit of reading, and I do follow up on the request for some chronological order with the dating. That would have stopped my first question and saved a bit of time. But other than that, I enjoyed it. But just a bit of chronological order would be a great help. Thank you.
And Councillor Drysdale.
Yeah, just following up on on your own response, convener, to Councillor Forbes. Just to say that there was such a briefing under the in the previous term, and which was quite well attended. If yourself missed it, Councillor Forbes, then I absolutely agree that for the benefit of all new and current elected members, that there is a repeat session, because as I said earlier at the start of my first question, to the convener, thanking him for bringing forward this paper today to raise awareness of these issues, which are just a small fraction of the overall area of responsibility of the IJB, has been very important, very illuminating. And I was chair of the IJB, and there's quite a lot of information there that's new to me as well. I think it's very important that all 40 elected members are very clear on what's going on here in the health and social care space on behalf of the people of Perth and Kinross, because it takes up a lot of the council's money as well, and so we really need to know what we're spending our money on, and to be well informed about what are significant priorities for very many of our residents. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. If there are no further comments, I'll just say you're making me blush, Councillor Drysdale, but really thank you to Ms. Rolfe and Mr. Dixon in particular for their work in bringing forward the report, and of course, as was mentioned earlier, their full and detailed answers to members' questions today. I'm going to suggest that we add a point onto the outstanding business statement and action to deliver the briefing that we were just talking about on how the Health and Social Care Partnership works for all members. And then I'll move the report. I'm content to agree with the officer recommendation of reasonable assurance, but I would also add on a further recommendation, which is that we communicate the fact that this committee has reasonable assurance to the Audit and Performance Committee of the Integration Joint Board, which is the purpose, formally communicate that, which is the purpose of bringing the report here today. Is that agreeable to all members?
Happy to second that.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. So that report is agreed. That concludes the meeting. Thank you to all members for their attendance and for officers' attendance and for answering questions.